Thank you, Lascia Horla. Minister, Council Regulation EC 1224/2009 requires that actions be taken to ensure compliance with the rules of the Common Fisheries Policy. Clearly, enforcement action is necessitated by our membership of the EU, and Statutory Instrument 318 sets out that enforcement action for Ireland. The enforcement is the imposition of penalty points for serious infringements of the Common Fisheries Policy. But there are three issues I'd like to raise, and the first issue, more likely a question. It should the implementation of the penalty point system be done by way of primary legislation, in that it is setting up new competent authorities such as the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority and the Determination Panel for dealing with the system, and is delegating serious powers to these bodies. My second issue with Statutory Instrument 318 provides that the Sea Fisheries Protection Authority will set up a determination panel to investigate infringements and allot penalty points when it determines that a serious infringement has occurred. This determination panel will determine whether a serious infringement has occurred or not on the balance of probabilities. This is a civil standard of the burden of proof, whereas the penalty being imposed is in the nature of a penalty imposed for a criminal offence, and at least then the burden for the determination panel should be at least be somewhere between a balance of probabilities test and the criminal standard of beyond reasonable doubt. The third issue I'd like to raise is the determination panel can in effect impose what would be considered a major sanction. Other legislation allowing for such sanctions in the case of removal of licence from, such as auctioneers, is primary legislation, and a major sanction such as the removal of their licence must be confirmed by the High Court. If a fishing boat is about to acquire the maximum number of points such that it cannot fish, and taking into account that the sanction follows the ship, it should also require confirmation of the High Court. Anything less than primary legislation to ensure that the rights of the fishermen, for which I remind the House is an indigenous coastal rural activity and employs in excess of 12,000 people in areas otherwise starved of employment other than for tourism. So rural harbour areas such as Killybegs, Howth, Kilmore, the Hook and Duncannon, all harbours where local fishermen contribute greatly to the tourist attractions in many of those areas, which are the finest seafood restaurants this country has to offer. It is not by accident that Wexford and many coastal counties have their fair share of award-winning seafood restaurants. It is down to the hard labour of both the fishing and hospitality sector. There is good reason why I express these concerns, and it is one of personal experience where a penalty point system was being introduced in another sector, which equally had the imposition of penalty points as enforcement for serious infringements. Something that was welcomed within the sector, as it was felt it would serve to implement a standard across the sector for all to abide by. The penalty point regime in this case would, if received, saw 12 points closing the business for a period of 30 days. The point system had credibility until 3 points were applied for the non-wearing of a name tag by the receptionist in the business. The case went all the way to the High Court. It was settled and saw the withdrawal of the penalty point provision in that sector. We must ensure that, as the fishing sector is a rather small cohort, that it is never personal between enforcers and fishermen. Another good reason that having the removal of a licence should be affirmed by the High Court. Really, all is being requested is fair procedures and due process in the manner of which it's appropriate, and that, in this case, is above reasonable doubt and closer to beyond a reasonable doubt, and I'd ask that the House consider it in that light. The people who engage in fishing activities do so in all weathers, often horrendous conditions to put food on our tables. They need nourishment, not punishment. We must support and not discourage them, and unfairness is never a source of encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.